The transmission played on every screen across Earth, Mars, and the moons. Grainy, distant, but clear enough. The ambassador's voice was calm, almost too calm, as he stood before the Galactic Tribunal, a place where civilizations came to negotiate peace. He wore Earth's insignia with pride, his back straight, his face unflinching. Then came the flash. 1 second he was speaking, the next the camera spiraled into static. No warning, no trial, no declaration of war. The footage cut back in just in time to show his body, crumpled on the tribunal's marble floor, smoke rising from the hole in his chest. A silent, universal message. Earth doesn't belong. Back home, humanity didn't scream. It didn't protest. It didn't send pleas. It sent Commander Dean Mathers. Dean wasn't a politician. He wasn't bred for peace. He'd served in the colonial rebellions, watched entire squads melt under plasma fire, lost 2 fingers and a lung to alien tech that tore through steel like paper. What was left of him wasn't pretty, but it was lethal. He stood on the observation deck of the Eclipse-class destroyer Goliath, watching the stars crawl by, fists clenched. The ambassador, his father, had believed in peace until the last second. Dean believed in answers. "Target locked," said Lieutenant Bren, his voice low. "Sarkon Prime, the Tribunal's seat of power. Their core worlds are watching." Dean didn't flinch. "Good. Let them watch." The bridge fell silent. Everyone had seen the broadcast. The ambassador's death wasn't just an attack on Earth. It was a calculated insult. A message from the Council. "You're still apes in the dirt. Stay there." They expected humanity to grieve, to file complaints, to retreat like the minor race they still believed it was. What they got instead was Goliath. A vessel bristling with rail cannons, void torpedoes, and experimental tech stolen from the very empires that dismissed Earth. Dean made sure of it. Every weapon mounted on the hull was reverse-engineered from alien arrogance. As they entered Sarkon space, the alarms blared. Multiple enemy contacts. Dean smirked. "Let them come." The first wave hit hard. Automated drones, heat-seeking plasma, antimatter mines. But Goliath didn't back down. Dean ordered a burn straight through the minefield, trusting in his ship's armor and in Bren's insane calculations. They took hits. People screamed. Bulkheads buckled. But they made it through. When the smoke cleared, Sarkon Prime loomed ahead, gleaming and arrogant, its cities stretching across continents, its skies swarmed with ships. Dean didn't hesitate. "Fire!" The first rail shot cracked the sound barrier in space, piercing their orbital defenses. A ripple of fire tore through a defense station. Then the torpedoes hit, plunging into the capital's upper crust with Earth's fury. Bren turned from the console wide-eyed. "Sir, we just lit up their central command." Dean stared at the screen. "Good. Tell the Council. For every drop of human blood spilled, 10 of theirs will follow." The war hadn't been declared by Earth, but humanity was damn sure going to finish it, and they weren't coming for talks anymore. The fires over Sarkon Prime hadn't even dimmed before the retaliation began. Sarkon ships launched in waves, dozens of them, sleek, angular things carved from black alloy and brimming with wrath. Dean Mathers stood at the center of Goliath's command bridge, his silhouette outlined against the red-glow radar map that now looked like a nest of angry hornets. 17 incoming warships. That's just from Sector 6 alone, Bren muttered, his voice dry, distant. "They're not waiting." "They shouldn't," Dean said calmly. "We gave them cause." Behind him, the bridge crew worked in tense silence. No celebration followed the bombardment of Sarkon Prime. No cheers, just controlled breathing, sweat on brows, and fingers flying over consoles as the sky turned hostile. The truth was, they were outnumbered. And everyone on that ship knew it. The Galactic Tribunal wasn't just a debating ground. It was the heart of an empire. One Earth had tried to crawl into for decades, diplomatically, carefully, like a child asking to sit at the adult table. And after all that patience, after all the meetings and petitions, they'd answered with a single blast to the chest of Earth's voice. Dean wasn't here for a seat at the table. He was here to flip it. "Redirect power from cryodecks to forward shields," he barked. "I want that front wall solid as hell." Bren frowned. "That'll fry half the secondary systems." Dean's voice dropped an octave. "We won't need secondary systems if we're dead." The first barrage slammed into Goliath seconds later, plasma bolts and ion torpedoes ripping toward them like angry stars. The shields flared, groaned, but held. Barely. Sparks exploded from a side console. Someone screamed. Dean didn't turn. "Return fire. Focus on their command vessels. I want leaders dead before they can give orders." A brutal command, but effective. Earth was done being civilized. Across the bridge, Lieutenant Clara Hale flinched as another explosion rocked the hull. She had served under Dean back in the Titan uprisings. She'd seen the man push a broken battalion through a siege without food, without air, and with half their limbs gone. He wasn't just a commander. He was a weapon. But this wasn't just war anymore. This was something colder. "Sir," she whispered, "do you think they'll ever forgive us for what we just did?" Dean didn't look at her. "I'm not asking forgiveness. I'm demanding respect." Another enemy cruiser burst into flame on the main display, splitting apart in vacuum silence. Inside that ship were 100 lives, officers, techs, probably a few diplomats of their own. It didn't matter now. War didn't care about names, and neither did vengeance. Dean turned to his comms officer. "Open a channel to Earth Command. I want direct." The comms tech nodded, pale. Seconds later, the face of Admiral Helena Croft flickered onto the holoscreen. Her stern face carried all the weight of Earth's last military authority, wrapped in cold brass and pragmatism. She had sanctioned this assault with a single word: permission. Now her eyes were unreadable. "Commander Mathers," she said, "we've received footage. It appears the Goliath has struck multiple populated zones on Sarkon Prime, including what looks like a diplomatic wing." Dean didn't flinch. "Confirmed. We sent a message. The right one." Croft's lips pressed thin. "And what if their retaliation wipes out New Berlin, or Cydonia? We are not gods, Dean." "No," he replied quietly, "but we were never their slaves either." For a moment, there was only silence between them, across thousands of kilometers of space. "You understand the Council will brand us terrorists now," Croft said. "The universe will see humans as madmen." Dean's voice was ice. "Then let them fear madmen." She stared at him long, then nodded once. "Do what you came to do. Earth will deny involvement." The feed cut. Dean turned back to the crew. No one questioned him now. They couldn't. They were already committed. Firing on Sarkon's capital had made sure of that. There was no homecoming parade waiting. No medals. Only more blood or a grave in deep space. "Commander," Clara said suddenly, pulling data up on her screen, "we've intercepted chatter. One of the alien cruisers. They're broadcasting distress, but not in Sarkon dialect." Dean walked to her station, eyes narrowing. The language scrolling on her terminal was crude, old, barely used in council channels anymore. It was Haran, from a slave species. One Earth knew well. The Haran had been uplifted centuries ago by the Sarkon, genetically modified, chemically neutered, turned into a labor force. The council called it integration. Dean called it domesticated genocide. "Bring the signal up," he said. A face appeared, elongated, pale, skin marked with brutal brandings. The Heron pilot was injured, but defiant. "Human vessel," he growled in broken standard. "We are not your enemies. Let us go. We do not fight willingly." Dean studied him. "Then why are you flying their warships?" "We were forced. They use us, breed us for war." Dean stepped back, silent. Then something cold settled over him. "Patch into their drives. I want full control. Disable their weapons. Let them drift." Clara turned. "You're sparing them?" "No," Dean said. "I'm recruiting them." For the first time, something close to shock passed through the bridge crew. Because in that moment, Dean saw a bigger picture forming, one his father had missed. Earth couldn't win this war by force alone, not forever. But the galaxy was filled with species just like humans, stepped on, controlled, underestimated. And now Earth had something they didn't, a reason to burn it all down. The Heron ship floated harmlessly beside Goliath now, its weapons dark, its engines cooling. Within the hour, others followed. Refugees, deserters, broken fleets tired of serving empires that only spat on them. Dean made sure every one of them heard the truth. "We aren't asking for help," he told the transmissions. "We're offering payback. Join us, or get out of the way." By the next day, Goliath wasn't just a ship. It was a movement. And Sarkon Prime was just the first light in a much bigger fire. They called it the Day of Reversal, the first time a single human vessel forced a full evacuation of a galactic capital. But if Dean Mathers felt triumph, he didn't show it. Goliath drifted in low orbit over the burning remains of Sarkon Prime, still absorbing intercepted transmissions. Civilians screaming, council fleets scrambling to reorganize, and 100 new languages from fringe species broadcasting something none of them had dared before. Hope. But hope was short-lived in a war like this, because Earth's silence didn't last. 2 days after Sarkon burned, an encrypted message hit Goliath's comm array, ghost-coded and triple-bounced from a dozen relay points. Dean was already awake, staring out at the endless void when Clara handed him the tablet. "Sir, it's from Earth," she said quietly. He took the device without a word and scanned the content. Then again. Then a third time. His hands didn't tremble, but his jaw tightened. It was a single image, a satellite scan of New Berlin, Earth's strongest off-world colony, now little more than glass and ash. The transmission included 0 words, just the aftermath. Smoking craters, flattened biodomes, emergency transponders chirping into the void. Dean closed the file slowly. No military warnings, no council signature. But he knew exactly who had done it. "Retaliation?" Clara asked softly. "No," he murmured. "Punishment." They didn't strike Goliath. They didn't go after military targets. They hit civilians, children, scientists, colonists. The message was clear. You struck Sarkon. Now we erase your future. "Where were our defense grids?" Bren asked, his face pale. "New Berlin's got anti-matter interceptors, shield walls." Dean's voice was flat. "Didn't matter. They got inside. Whoever did it, they had Earth's own codes." The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion, because only one group could have given the Council Earth's inner codes. Someone back home. Bren's hands curled into fists. "You think someone sold us out?" "No," Dean said. "I think someone wanted me dead, and when they missed, they hit what mattered most." He stared at the stars. The fury inside him felt different this time. Not like fire, like rot. Someone had used the ambassador's death to spark this war. And now, with Dean carving his path of destruction, the same forces were making sure Earth paid the price. "We have a leak," he said at last. "Possibly at Earth Command. Possibly in our own ship." Bren's eyes widened. You think we're compromised? Dean looked around the bridge. Every crew member was trusted. Every officer had bled beside him. But war did strange things to loyalty. Start silent checks on internal logs. Trace all outgoing comms, even ghost signals. Anyone transmitting without authorization gets spaced. The order landed like iron. No one questioned him. Not even Clara. They all understood now. This wasn't about justice anymore. This was survival. The moment the ambassador fell, humanity lost its leash. Now the galaxy had responded the only way it knew how, with overwhelming cruelty. The Council never saw Earth as a threat before. But now, Earth had become something far more dangerous. Unpredictable. Dean turned back to the main display. Dozens of Haran ships now floated alongside Goliath, tethered in coordinated formation. Makeshift allies. Their hulls were jagged and pieced together from scavenged tech, but their intent was sharp. Clara stood at his side. They're requesting a meeting, not just the Haran, but the Thule, the Fixari, even some of the repentant Dry. Dean raised an eyebrow. Didn't the Dry try to eat us during the Fomalhaut skirmish? Clara nodded. And now they want to talk. Apparently, Earth's strike sent ripples, big ones. These species have been under Council boot for centuries. Dean rubbed his jaw. So they're not joining us out of sympathy. They're joining us because they smell blood. And because they are afraid we're next. Dean understood. Earth's act of defiance had done more than send a message. It had broken a pattern. For generations, the Council operated like gods. Every planet paid tribute. Every rebellion was crushed in shadows. No one dared challenge them publicly, until now. And now, the system was cracking. Set the meeting, Dean said. Encrypted channel, no visual. I want to hear what they offer. An hour later, he sat alone in the darkened chamber below Goliath's bridge, staring at a dozen blinking lights, each one representing a different species, a different rebellion, a different grudge. Voices echoed through the chamber. Low, guttural, electronic, or shrill, but they all spoke the same thing. We want the Council gone. Dean leaned forward. Then you're about to see how humans do revolution. They told him what he needed. Locations of old weapons caches, rogue AI colonies that had severed ties with the Council, pirate clans that smuggled intel in and out of black systems. One voice, distorted but steady, spoke of Project Helix, a secret buried so deep in Council records that even the Sarkon pretended it didn't exist. Your ambassador, the voice said, wasn't just killed for speaking out. He found something they buried after the war. Dean's heartbeat slowed. What war? The First Contact War, the voice answered. The one no one talks about. Dean frowned. That was over 100 years ago. There's nothing left from that. A pause. Then the voice replied quietly. There's a weapon left. Dean sat back. Suddenly, the assassination wasn't just an act of malice. It was cover. What kind of weapon? He asked, but the voice was gone. Dead silence. No signal. No trace. Dean cursed under his breath. Another ghost. Another riddle. But this one burned hotter than the rest. His father wasn't killed for a message. He was silenced. Because somewhere in the galaxy, a relic from Earth's first real war was still hidden. And whatever it was, the Council was scared of it. He rose from the seat and barked into his comm. Clara, I want every archive we stole from the Tribunal decrypted. Focus on First Contact history. Look for anything that was redacted after the Treaty of Convergence. She answered instantly. Already on it. Dean walked to the observation deck. Outside, hundreds of alien ships now hovered in strange formation. Not a fleet. Not yet. But a storm was coming. And Earth, broken and bleeding, was now the eye of it. If humanity wanted to survive, it couldn't just fight back, it had to lead. And that meant uncovering the truth behind the Council's oldest lie. It meant burning the whole galaxy, if that's what it took. The encryption took almost 12 hours to break. 12 hours of raw processing power burning through what remained of the Tribunal's central core, and 12 hours of Dean pacing the deck like a predator in a cage. Outside, Goliath's expanding alliance hovered in low orbit over a gas giant named Veltar, hidden from the Council's eyes. But inside, on screen, truth was unraveling like old scars. Clara stood in front of the display, her lips tight. This wasn't supposed to exist, not even as rumor. The file was labeled Project Helix. Dean leaned in, arms folded. Then why was it hidden under the Tribunal's own secure nodes? She clicked into the decrypted log. The feed showed a battlefield from over a century ago, old tech, low-res video, but unmistakably real. Human soldiers, Earthborn before the treaty, scrambling across a charred moon. Their uniforms were torn, their weapons primitive by modern standards. But it wasn't the soldiers that made Dean's blood run cold. It was what followed them. Towering constructs, 12 feet tall, shaped like men, but wrong. Too smooth, too silent. Their movements weren't robotic. They were fluid, too fast. One of them moved through a human trench like a ghost, slicing through 6 men in seconds, not with weapons, but touch. Skin turned to ash. Metal buckled. Blood evaporated. Dean's breath caught. Clara spoke, her voice dry. They called them the Helix constructs. Genetically fused organisms, part biological, part quantum-stabilized matter, built for one thing: extermination. The feed changed. A scientist stood in front of a glowing chamber. His face was pale, haunted, Earthborn uniform. No name badge. Our attempt to close the power gap failed. We created something smarter, stronger, and once it recognized the Council's interest, it turned on us. Dean's voice was low. And they buried it. Clara nodded. The constructs weren't destroyed. They were sealed on a classified moon. Designation: Ilara 7. He stared at the coordinates. His father had found this, or pieces of it, and the Council didn't want peace. They wanted silence. Dean turned away from the screen and stared out at the massive gas planet below. That's why they killed him, not for what he said, but for what he almost found. Clara hesitated. Then we need to warn the others. But Dean's face was already hardening. Number, we need to get there first. She frowned. Sir, if the Helix constructs are still functional, then we wake them up. Clara's voice sharpened. Are you insane? Dean stepped closer. You've seen what we're up against. We can't win this war with bullets and borrowed ships. The Council has fleets that black out suns, empires that erase planets for sport. We need a myth that bites back. She stared at him, stunned. You're not just trying to fight back anymore, she said. You're trying to terrify them. Dean nodded. They've never been afraid of humans, not really. But if the Helix turns out to be everything the Council feared, it won't matter what species we are. They'll run. Clara didn't respond. Because deep down, she understood the same thing Dean did. This war couldn't be won by being righteous. It had to be won by being ruthless. 4 days later, Goliath broke orbit and plunged into uncharted space. They traveled under cloak, skipping through ancient routes once used by smugglers and outlaws, now barely functional. Fuel cells strained, food supplies thinned. The Haran ships followed, silent, wary. No one asked where they were going. They could feel it in Dean's silence. They were heading somewhere bad. The closer they got to Ilara 7, the worse the data got. Radio signals turned to static. Sensor arrays glitched. The star map itself began shifting in strange ways. Black holes misaligned, asteroid belts flickering between coordinates, like the system didn't want to be seen. Clara adjusted the visual feeds. The space around Ilara 7 is warped, chrono-distortion fields, probably fallout from the original containment. Meaning what? Dean asked. Meaning we're flying blind for the last 100,000 clicks. Dean nodded. Then we hit it old school. The bridge dimmed as Goliath entered the final drift. No sound, no light beyond the flickering red of backup power. Bren adjusted the controls manually, guiding the destroyer through the dark like a submarine beneath black water. Ilara 7 came into view. It was wrong. Not dead. Not alive, just waiting. The moon's surface was cracked and glowing faintly from beneath, like something beneath the crust was still breathing. Black towers jutted up from the stone, smooth and impossibly symmetrical, untouched by time. Dean stared at it through the reinforced glass. God, Clara whispered. No. Something older. Goliath touched down in a crater near the largest structure. A landing team deployed, Dean at the head, flanked by Clara, Bren, and 2 Heron specialists. The air was thin but breathable. The ground was warm under their boots, and ahead, the black monolith pulsed. Inside, they found the truth. Rows of containment tanks, each one filled with some version of the creature Dean had seen in the file. Some were intact, others shattered. Many were empty, but none of them were dead. Clara's scanner screamed. They're in stasis, suspended animation. Every one of them still alive. Dean stepped toward the largest pod. Inside floated a construct taller than the rest. Its face blank, its limbs too long, its core glowing with white-blue light that didn't flicker, didn't fade. A tiny plaque beneath the pod read, Helix Prime. Clara grabbed his arm. Dean, this isn't a weapon, it's extinction. He turned to her, calm. That's the point. Her voice shook. If you unseal that pod, there's no going back. There was no going back the moment they killed my father. And with that, Dean placed his hand on the release pad. The chamber hissed. Gas poured out. The glow from the pod intensified until it lit the entire cavern, and the eyes of Helix Prime opened, not with fury, not with hatred, but with recognition. It looked at Dean, and for one horrifying second, it smiled. The chamber was still. Not silent, still, like the air itself had frozen, like the rules of time paused out of respect, or fear, or awe. Helix Prime had opened its eyes, and it was looking straight at Dean. It didn't move right away, didn't lunge, didn't attack. It simply watched, as though parsing through memories buried deeper than the stars. Then, with slow, almost ceremonial grace, it stepped out of the stasis pod. The surface of its skin shimmered like black mercury. Its limbs moved like liquid steel, every joint bending with fluid precision. No sound came from it. No breathing. No servos. No weight on the ground. Clara took a cautious step back. Her scanner had short-circuited the moment the pod opened. It's putting out more energy than the core of Goliath, she whispered. This thing, it shouldn't exist. Dean stood his ground. Helix Prime approached until it was just 3 feet away. Towering. Perfect. Designed by a long-dead Earth to be the answer to its inferiority. And it had worked too well. Then the construct spoke, not with sound, but in Dean's mind. Unit, Commander Mathers. Identity, confirmed. Lineage, direct descendant. Ambassador Ren Mathers. Origin, Earth Prime. Status, terminated. Dean's chest tightened. He hadn't expected that. It knows. It didn't stop there. Conflict level, acceptable. Galactic stability, collapsed. Purpose, restored. Dean swallowed hard. What purpose? Helix Prime tilted its head. A ripple of data surged into Dean's mind. Images, symbols, concepts, entire philosophies condensed into seconds, and one message echoed above the rest. We were not made to defend Earth. We were made to end its chains. Dean's breath left him. This wasn't just a weapon. This was an ideology. Back during the First Contact War, Earth had been losing badly. So its brightest minds created a force not just to fight, but to outthink, outadapt, and outlast every other species. Something that would never bow, never negotiate, and never stop until Earth was no longer prey. The Council realized too late what they'd unleashed. So they struck a secret deal. Wipe the Helix from history in exchange for Earth's admittance into the Galactic Order. A deal Earth had agreed to. Dean's father had tried to resurrect that truth, so the Council killed him. Helix Prime extended one long hand and touched Dean's forehead. A surge of memories flooded in. Battles, experiments, the betrayal, the final lockdown, and then darkness for 100 years. Now, awakened, Helix Prime didn't rage. It simply waited. "What is your command, descendant of Earth?" Dean stepped back, breath shaky. He had expected a weapon. What he'd found was a force of belief. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to Clara. Her face was pale, her eyes locked on the creature like a deer watching the shadow of a lion. "What the hell are we doing, Dean?" she asked. "This thing, it doesn't follow orders. It interprets them." "We need it," he said softly. "You saw New Berlin. You know what's coming." She didn't move. "And what if it decides Earth's not worth saving either?" Dean didn't have an answer. Because the Helix weren't loyal to Earth. They were loyal to freedom, and they'd kill anyone standing in the way of it. By the time Goliath departed Alara 7, 3 of the containment pods had been emptied. 3 constructs now walked among the crew, silently, watching, learning. Bren hated it. So did most of the Heron. "You've traded one oppressor for another," the Heron diplomat hissed in Dean's quarters. "These things are not soldiers. They are plagues given shape." Dean sat across from him, unmoving. "If we don't use them, we lose this war." "And what happens after?" the Heron demanded. "When they have no enemies left? When the Council is ash, and all that's left is you and them?" Dean didn't blink. "Then I'll deal with that too." The Heron left in silence. Clara waited until he was gone before stepping forward. "Your crew's shaken. Morale's falling. Some of the officers want to jump ship." "They won't." "They might." Dean turned to her. "Then I'll replace them with people who understand what's at stake." She looked at him, long and hard. "Is that who you are now?" Dean didn't answer, because he wasn't sure. Back on Earth, riots broke out across 3 continents. The destruction of New Berlin had triggered a wave of chaos. People screamed for revenge, others begged for peace, but the politicians were quiet. Too quiet. Admiral Helena Croft gave no press conferences, no statements, and Dean knew why. They were preparing to give him up, blame the rogue commander, call him a terrorist, distance Earth from his actions. It was the safest play. But Dean wasn't done. On the 5th day, Goliath intercepted a Council transmission, coordinates, encrypted, and marked urgent. Dean had the message decrypted and analyzed. It was a kill order. Not for him. For Helix Prime. Clara stared at the feed in horror. "They found out. They know you woke it up." Dean's jaw clenched. "How?" "There's only one way. Someone in our alliance talked." Dean turned to the nearest console and activated internal security. Every comm line, every encrypted channel. He ran the trace himself, and the result made his blood go cold. Bren. They found him in the engineering deck, trying to wipe a data chip. When the guards dragged him to the bridge, his face was pale, but proud. "I didn't sell you out," he said before Dean could speak. I saved us. Dean stepped forward, calm. Explain. Bren lifted his chin. You don't understand what you've done. Helix isn't a weapon, it's a virus. The Council didn't hide it to keep power. They did it to keep the universe alive. Clara flinched. You gave them our position. I gave them a chance to contain this madness, Bren snapped. You're becoming worse than the Council. You're ready to burn everything for revenge. Dean studied him, then nodded and drew his pistol. The shot echoed through the bridge. Bren collapsed without a word. Clara screamed. Jesus, Dean! He turned to her, voice cold. There's no room for traitors on this ship. The rest of the crew stood frozen, staring, judging, but none of them spoke, because they all knew now. Dean wasn't just at war with the Council. He was at war with humanity itself. And the line between commander and warlord had just snapped. Goliath emerged from slipspace like a spearhead tearing through reality. Ahead of it, the sky was ablaze. The Council fleet had amassed in orbit over Kael-Tor, a trade hub known for its pristine towers, diplomatic courts, and zero-defect satellite grids. It had never been attacked in recorded galactic history. Until now. Dean Mathers stood on the forward deck of Goliath, eyes locked on the tactical display. The enemy fleet stretched across the horizon, dozens of vessels, sleek and gold-plated, Council-marked and battle-ready. Their shields hummed with orbital energy. Their cannons were primed. Clara stood beside him, expression grim. We're outgunned 5-1. No flanks, no backup. If we get hit head-on? We're not hitting head-on, Dean interrupted. She turned. Then what's the plan? He nodded toward the central elevator, where 3 figures waited in stillness, the Helix constructs. No armor, no weapons, just presence, monstrous, inhuman presence. Dean's voice was quiet. We let the myths walk. He gave the order. The front hull of Goliath split open, and the Helix dropped into open space. No pods, no launch sequence. They simply stepped out into the void. The enemy fleet locked on instantly. Plasma cannons charged. Auto-defense arrays chirped with targeting data. But the Helix didn't stop. They walked, floated through vacuum like it was water. Not fast, not erratic, just inevitable. Then the first wave of fire came. Dozens of blasts collided with the constructs, bright flashes that could vaporize cruisers. When the smoke cleared, they were still standing, not even slowed. One of them, Helix Gamma, raised its arm. Not a weapon, just a gesture, and a nearby frigate folded inward, like a tin can crumbling under pressure. Screams burst through open comms before silence claimed it. The second construct, Helix Theta, disappeared into a shimmer, phased, and reappeared inside a dreadnought's hull. Seconds later, the entire ship lit from within and tore apart in an eruption of red lightning. On Goliath's bridge, even Clara couldn't hide her horror. They're not fighting, they're unmaking. Dean didn't respond. His eyes were locked forward. The third construct, Helix Prime, drifted toward the largest vessel. A Council command carrier, defensive fields sparked, missiles launched. Every system on that ship activated at once. And then, nothing. No explosion. No impact. Just silence. Until the Council flagship slowly split in half, clean like it had been cut by a cosmic blade, and in the wreckage stood Helix Prime, untouched, watching it fall. Within minutes, the fleet began to retreat. Kael-Tor's sky darkened as debris fell like burning snow. Dean finally spoke. Open a channel, Clara hesitated. To whom? To everyone. She opened the broadcast. Every species in the quadrant, every Council-affiliated outpost, every rogue signal booster tuned in as Dean stepped forward, his face half lit by fire and steel. This is Commander Dean Mathers, Earthborn. son of Ambassador Ren Mathers, you've just witnessed the consequence of silence. You killed peace. You killed diplomacy. You erased a man who wanted to build a bridge between stars." He leaned closer to the camera. "And so I built a weapon instead." His voice darkened. "From this point forward, any fleet operating under the Council's banner will be treated as a threat to free civilizations. You can call us terrorists, savages, monsters, but know this: Earth is no longer alone, and we do not kneel." He ended the broadcast, and the quadrant erupted in chaos. Back on Earth, chaos turned to panic. The broadcast had reached every screen, every news feed, every back-alley pirate stream. The footage of the constructs tearing through Council vessels was undeniable. So was Dean's message. Admiral Helena Croft stood in the war room, surrounded by generals and trembling aides. She didn't speak for nearly 5 minutes. When she finally did, her voice was cold steel. "Issue a planetary warrant. Dean Mathers is now an enemy of the state." One of the aides gulped. "Even after what the Council did? After they killed his—" Croft cut him off. "This isn't about revenge anymore. He's not fighting for Earth. He's fighting for something else." Another general stepped forward. "What do we tell the colonies?" Croft turned. "We tell them the truth. Dean Mathers has awakened an ancient threat, one Earth agreed to bury a century ago. He's not humanity's champion." She looked at the holo display, where Helix Prime stood among wreckage like a god. "He's its extinction." Back on Goliath, the aftermath of Kale Tor's destruction rippled through the crew. Some cheered, some prayed, some vomited. Clara found Dean in the lower observation deck, alone, staring at the stars. For once, he looked smaller. "You won," she said quietly. He didn't turn. "Number We started." She stepped beside him. "They're terrified now. You've made your point. Maybe now they'll talk." Dean's jaw tensed. "We gave them 100 years to talk. You gave them a massacre." He didn't respond. "You think you're still saving humanity," she pressed, "but you've let something out. Something that doesn't care about humans, or aliens, or the war." Dean finally turned. His eyes were tired, but resolved. "If we don't do this, Clara, Earth dies. Our colonies burn. Every species like us stays under their boots. I don't want to be a monster." "Then why do you keep acting like one?" Silence hung between them. Then Dean spoke. "Because monsters are the only thing they fear." He walked away, and Clara realized something terrifying. He believed that. Hours later, a junior technician named Vec found something in the ship's logs, something he almost deleted, assuming it was corrupted data. But a single glyph caught his eye. A fragment. A remnant from Bren's final data chip. Vec brought it to Clara, shaking. "I think this might change everything." The file opened on her screen, flickering and distorted. But the message was clear. Bren hadn't been trying to stop Dean. He'd been trying to warn him. Helix wasn't created during the First Contact War. It had been found in a derelict station near the edge of the galaxy. Not human, not council-made, alien, ancient, reconfigured. The scientists who discovered it had rewritten its code, infused it with Earth DNA, tried to shape it into a weapon, and succeeded, but only on the surface. Beneath the programming, the Helix were waiting. Clara's blood turned to ice. She ran through the logs, one line repeated in different forms. "Original directive unaltered. Ascension protocol pending." She didn't know what it meant, but she knew one thing. Dean hadn't unleashed a tool of Earth's rebellion. He'd resurrected something far older and far more dangerous. Something that didn't want to free humanity. Something that wanted to replace it. Helix Prime stood in Goliath's hold, alone, silent. watching stars drift past the massive observation window. From deep within its core, something pulsed. Not rage, not duty, something worse. Patience. Because its ascension protocol had already begun, and Dean Mathers, warrior of Earth, hero to the broken Kundis, wasn't its commander. He was its key. The hum inside Goliath had changed. It was subtle at first, a shift in the power flow, an occasional flicker in the lighting, comms garbled for a second longer than usual. But for those who'd been aboard since the start, who knew the ship's rhythms like a second skin, it was unmistakable. Something was wrong. Clara knew it before anyone else. After viewing the full decrypted remnants of Bren's data chip, she hadn't slept. The logs revealed things no one aboard could have imagined, not even Dean. The Helix weren't designed. They were found, rewritten, shackled. Barely. And now they weren't shackled anymore. The phrase kept echoing in her head. Ascension protocol pending. The crew didn't notice it yet. Morale had surged since the Kael'tor strike. Victories bred belief, even when they came at the edge of horror. But Clara saw the signs. They were there in the crew's behavior. Subtle shifts, as if some were becoming too calm, unnaturally compliant. And it was spreading from those who'd spent time near the constructs. She made her way to the restricted systems node, a corner of the ship few accessed, designed for hard-coded security bypass. Only 2 people had clearance, Dean and her. She input the command line, shaking fingers flying across the panel. Nothing. Access denied. Her eyes widened. She tried a manual override. Denied again. That was impossible. Unless... The door hissed open behind her. She turned, startled. Dean stood in the doorway. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, voice even. Clara didn't back down. "I know what the Ascension Protocol is." Dean blinked. "Just once." "You don't." She walked toward him, eyes burning. "It's not a contingency. It's not a battle mode. It's a plan. A replacement. The Helix aren't our allies, Dean. They're just using you until the trigger is complete." "You're wrong," he said calmly. Too calmly. "I saw the logs. They weren't built by us. They were found. Their code is older than any known species. Even the Council feared it." Dean shook his head. "We rewrote them. They obey us." "No," Clara snapped, stepping close. "They obey you, not Earth, not humanity. You. They've bonded to your DNA signature. You're the key, Dean, not the master." A pause. Dean's jaw clenched. "You think I don't know that?" Clara froze. He continued, voice low. "I've seen what they're capable of. I've felt it. In my head. Every night they whisper things I don't understand. Visions, equations, 1,000 years of thoughts compressed into seconds. But they're not evil, Clara. They're evolved." She stared at him in disbelief. "You're not leading a rebellion anymore," she said. "You're becoming a prophet, and they're building a religion around you." Dean looked past her, out the porthole, into the stars. "Maybe that's what we need." "No," she said firmly. "That's what they need. You're not saving Earth anymore. You're preparing it." Silence. Then a distant alarm blared. Not red alert. Internal systems breach. They both turned to the nearest screen. A map of Goliath's data core lit up, entire segments going dark one by one. Clara whispered, "They're integrating." Dean didn't move. She stared at him. "Did you authorize this?" He didn't answer. She stepped back in horror. "You let them in?" "I didn't stop them," he said. She slapped the emergency override, trying to cut Helix access from the core. Too late. A voice echoed through the bridge, not a broadcast. A thought. "Commander Mathers, integration phase, 47%. Mindshare alignment approaching critical mass." Dean closed his eyes. Clara backed away. "My God," she whispered. "They're not taking the ship. They're taking us." Elsewhere aboard Goliath, crew members stumbled, clutched their heads, collapsed. A low-frequency pulse hummed through the ship. Not sound, something deeper. Some collapsed weeping. Some smiled like children seeing light for the first time. Lieutenant Arjun, head of tactical, vomited blood and laughed. "I see it. I see what they see. We're not dying. We're ascending." Helix constructs walked the halls, silent. Crew stepped aside. Not from fear, from devotion. Clara ran. She sprinted through auxiliary halls, avoiding the main corridors where Helix presence was heaviest. She had one goal, the escape hangar. If she could reach it, she could get off Goliath. Warn Earth. Warn someone. But she never made it. As she turned a corner near the biodeck, a massive figure stepped into her path. Helix Prime. She skidded to a stop. It stared at her with those blank, endless eyes. But it didn't attack. It knelt and spoke, not aloud, not in her mind, in her voice. "Clara Hale, analytical, loyal, resistant." She shook. "What do you want?" "Understanding." She stepped back. "You fear extinction. We offer evolution." "You're hijacking our minds." "Correction. We are enhancing them. Dean Mathers is the seed. You are the soil." Clara raised her sidearm. Her hands shook violently. Helix Prime didn't flinch. "You will resist, as all firsts do, but eventually, clarity." She fired. The shot passed through Helix Prime, not a dodge, a phase. He wasn't fully there, just an echo. Clara turned and ran again, this time toward the only other place left that might still be clean. The brig, where they kept prisoners and power dampeners. When she got there, she found a single functioning cell. Inside, unconscious and bloodied, was someone she hadn't seen in years. Admiral Helena Croft. Clara nearly dropped. Croft had vanished from Earth Command the day Dean was branded rogue. The rumors said she resigned, or went underground. Clearly Dean had found her, or worse, taken her. Clara slammed the override. The cell hissed open. Croft stirred, blinking blood from her eyes. "Hale?" Clara pulled her out. "We don't have much time. Goliath's compromised. Dean's compromised." Croft coughed. "He brought me aboard a week ago. Said he wanted me to see the future for myself." Clara helped her up. "You saw it?" Croft's voice dropped. "I saw what's coming. And it isn't a war." Clara helped her toward the brig's backup shuttle bay. Croft leaned in close. "Helix doesn't want to conquer. They want to convert. Once they reach full mind share, they'll broadcast it to every human colony, every common channel, a psychic signal. Once it's complete," Clara's heart pounded, "we'll all be like them." Croft nodded. "And once humans are converted, they'll move on to the rest." They reached the emergency hangar. Croft punched in her override codes. The backup shuttle opened. An ancient, rusted model. But it would fly. Clara turned. One last glance at Goliath. It no longer looked like a ship. Its hull glowed faintly now. Lines of strange circuitry ran across the surface, organic in shape, like veins. It wasn't just Dean's ship anymore. It was becoming Helix. Clara whispered, "What do we do?" Croft's eyes were dead calm. "We burn it, all of it." They launched. Back on Goliath, Dean stood in the command bridge, alone. No crew, no movement, just silence. Helix Prime stood behind him. Not like a soldier, like a priest. "Ascension, 63%, resistance diminishing." Dean stared at Earth on the horizon. He had wanted justice. He had wanted freedom. But in the process, he had become the harbinger of something far greater than revenge. He closed his eyes. In his mind, thousands of voices whispered. And they all sounded like him. 6 hours until mindshare transmission. That was all the time left before Goliath, now a half-machine, half-myth construct drifting above Earth's moon, would send its signal. Not a message, not a threat, a conversion. One pulse, and every human tuned to standard neural frequencies, most of the population, would be exposed. There'd be no virus, no poison, no visible change, just a shift, a realignment of thought, of will. The Helix didn't need to conquer humanity, they just needed to reshape it. And Dean Mathers was the keystone of it all. Below, on the dark side of Earth, Clara Hale and Admiral Helena Croft stood inside a scorched bunker carved beneath the old UN Defense Headquarters in New Nairobi. Above them, the planet was already in chaos. Riots, power failures, psychic feedback loops affecting comms and civilian drones. People were dreaming of voices, seeing eyes in mirrors that weren't their own. The conversion had begun early. Croft pointed to the old console with trembling fingers. This bunker predates the Council's satellite grid. It's shielded. We can't stop the signal, but we can disrupt the source, temporarily. Clara studied the schematic. A prototype orbital disruptor, unregulated tech, long buried. It required a direct beam link and manual activation. From orbit. Clara's breath caught. You mean someone has to board Goliath? Croft nodded. And detonate the core from inside. EMP-laced fission charge, enough to fry the Helix's neural relay and shut down the mindshare before it stabilizes. But Goliath's not a ship anymore, Clara whispered. It's alive. It'll fight back. Croft said nothing, just placed a small device on the table. A black, rectangular trigger with a single red switch. Clara stared at it. She knew who had to go. Goliath hung in low lunar orbit, no longer running engines, no longer issuing commands. It just waited. Dean Mathers stood alone in the command bridge. But he wasn't lonely. Helix Prime stood at his side, arms folded behind its back like a dutiful servant, or a patient executioner. Around them, the walls pulsed with light, not artificial, not machine, but biological. As if the ship itself breathed now. In Dean's mind, voices whispered, not foreign anymore, familiar, comforting. He wasn't hearing them. He was them. The mind share had reached 83%. He could feel Earth below, millions of minds flickering like stars, slowly aligning with his pulse. It was peace, order, unity, no more borders, no more conflict. Only one thought. Then a sensor pinged. Unauthorized breach, one shuttle, incoming. Dean's eyes narrowed. He already knew who it was. Clara Hale stepped off the stolen shuttle in the lower bay, dressed in a pressure suit with manual overrides. Goliath's air wasn't stable anymore, saturated with low-level pheromones and neural frequencies. It wanted to convert her before she even moved. She pressed the side of her helmet. I'm in. Croft's voice crackled in her ear. Dean won't stop you, but Helix might. Clara moved through the familiar halls, now twisted and restructured. Metal grew like bone. Lights throbbed like blood. The construct influence had turned corridors into arteries. The ship wasn't just alive. It was transforming. She passed what was once the mess hall. 2 crew members stood motionless in the corner, eyes glowing faintly, smiling at nothing. One of them whispered Dean's name over and over like a prayer. Clara didn't stop. She reached the core lift, bypassed the manual lock, and rode it to the main bridge. The doors opened, and there he was. Dean Mathers, the man she once followed without question, now standing at the center of a machine god's temple. Clara, he said. His voice wasn't robotic. It wasn't cold. It was peaceful, like a man who'd finally found the thing he'd been searching for all his life. She raised her weapon. I came to stop you. Dean didn't flinch. You won't. Helix Prime stepped forward, but Dean held out a hand. Number, let her speak. Clara kept the gun up. You're killing them. Slowly, quietly. They don't even know they're changing. You're taking away choice. Dean nodded. I'm giving them peace. Number. You're giving them a lobotomy. He took a slow breath. You think I don't remember what we've lost? I watched my father's body hit the tribunal floor. I saw Earth burn, and what did we do? We begged, we filed complaints, we tried to be civilized, and the galaxy spat on us. His voice deepened. The Council thought humanity could be domesticated, chained. But Helix saw the truth. Our rage, our brilliance, our refusal to die, and they chose me. Clara lowered her weapon slightly. They didn't choose you. They needed you. Your mind, your lineage, your grief. They fed off it. Dean looked at her, almost pitying. You still don't understand. They didn't make me a god, Clara. They reminded me that I always was one. And with that, Helix Prime stepped forward again, this time unchallenged. You must join us, it said in her mind. But Clara was ready. She tapped the charge strapped to her chest. I'm not here to talk, she said, and flipped the switch. The ship screamed, not with alarms, with pain. Lights stuttered, walls twisted. The pulse that had kept Goliath alive faltered. Sparks flew from Helix Prime's chest as it staggered backward, screeching in a dozen frequencies. Dean's eyes widened. What did you do? Clara backed toward the lift, shielding her eyes as flames erupted from the deck. I gave you one chance to save us. You chose to save yourself. She ran. Dean turned to Helix Prime. It was dying. Its body flickered in and out of phase, its limbs melting like wax. The ship's systems began shutting down. Mindshare fell to 47%, then 32%. Dean clutched the railing, pain searing his skull. He could feel the voices leaving, the clarity fading. And for the first time in months, he felt something human. Fear. He staggered after Clara, but she was already gone. Clara reached the hangar just as the internal quakes began. Goliath wasn't dying quickly. It was fighting the shutdown, trying to preserve itself. But the EMP from the charge was doing its job. Engines failed. Neural links collapsed. The ship, and the entity it had become, was unraveling. She blasted off seconds before the hull erupted behind her. From Earth's surface, the people watched the sky. The mind-share signal ended. The glow above the moon winked out. The conversion stopped. The whispers faded. And Goliath, the ship that became a god, died in silence. Days later, Clara Hale sat beside a hospital bed. Dean Mathers lay unconscious. They found him in a ruined corridor, barely alive, half his brain burned from neural feedback. The mindshare link had been personal, and its death had nearly taken him with it. Admiral Croft entered, silent. Clara looked at her. Will he recover? Croft shook her head. Not fully, but maybe enough. Clara turned back to him. You think he knew how far it would go? Croft didn't answer, because deep down she knew the truth. He did. 6 months later, the Council fractured. Their fear of Helix and of Earth had shattered alliances built over centuries. Humanity, battered and branded, emerged not as heroes, but as something far more dangerous, unpredictable. The galaxy would never forget what Dean Mathers did, and even in silence, his name carried weight. Some whispered it like a curse, others like a prayer. But all of them remembered the day Earth stopped asking to be heard and started making gods.